All right, welcome everyone. Let me get my screen pulled up here. All right. Hello. We are so excited to have you here today. This session is called Turning Obstacles into Stepping Stones. Our lovely presenters are Jill Huntsberger and Beth Boley, who both have a lot of great professional experience around navigating conflict in the workplace and how to best resolve these issues. We'll get started with introductions. My name is Michaela and I will be hosting today's session. I am a research analyst on the RMSC team, originally from Minnesota, but currently reside in Denver, where it's actually snowing today. I love to practice yoga, go on hikes, or do anything that relates to being outside. I love listening to live music and also spending time with friends and family. My Carnegie persona is the energetic and supportive shepherd, and my colors are purple, green, and red. I will pass it off to our co-host, Jill.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michaela. I'm Jill Huntsberger. I'm Assistant Director of Project Management in the Client Success team that supports Slate. I have a background in college recruiting as well as visual arts. And fun fact, I am a new cat parent to the one and only Stanley Clementine, a very silly orange boy who is locked out of my office and not happy about it. I am the adventurous and creative architect, and my colors are orange, blue, and green. And over to my co-presenter, Beth.
Thanks, Jill. I am Beth Boley. I'm an account manager with RMS&C, and I am an avid learner, loves to travel. I like all kinds of creative pursuits and spending time in nature, and I am a devoted nana to my 9-year-old grandson, Jackson, who just beat me in 2 games of horse in recent days, but I took him down in one-on-one over the door basketball hoop, 20-8. So always competitive with him. And I am the creative and questioning adventurer, and my colors are green, maroon, and orange.
Awesome.
Did you?
Yeah, so this topic is a huge topic. And as we were putting together our oh wait, I skipped ahead. We gotta do a poll. I'm already all over the place. Okay. First thing before we jump into my next slide is we're gonna do a Zoom chat poll. So open up the Zoom chat. Michaela, go ahead to the next slide. When you think about conflict in the workplace, what emoji best represents how you feel? Yep. Oh, yes. Oh, some people are laughing, sweating. Yeah, that sound. Lots of sad eyes, throwy uppy face. Yeah, all of these. None of these are things you want to feel when you go to work, right? Absolutely. All right, keep it going. We can go to the next slide. So this topic is huge. And when Beth and I were putting this presentation together, we realized we could probably do like a full day seminar on this with breakouts and conversations and role play, but we got 30 minutes. So top hits. Our goal for today is to provide you with a toolkit to help prevent, manage, and resolve conflicts. So our agenda for this, to make that happen, we are going to start with some tools to prevent conflicts. Then we're going to talk about facing the situation head on. Then we'll talk about deciding when and how you should call in support. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers. If you have a question throughout the presentation, feel free to post that in the chat. Michaela will collect them and share those at the end. And our goal is also to take all of the ideas and questions and stuff that was shared in the chat and add that to a couple slides to the deck. So those will be included before we send out the final slide deck. That's our agenda. And so for our first topic, I'll pass it back to Beth.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. So preventing conflicts, I want you guys to think for just a minute about a bank account. It can be a savings account. It can be a regular checking account, but a savings account, something that you're consistently putting deposits into. And as we put those deposits in, that account balance grows. And then, like happened here in my local hometown last night, a hailstorm comes through. You have damage to your car, you have damage to your roof, you have an emergency expenditure that you have to make a withdrawal on that account. As long as you've been putting some consistent deposits in, there should be enough money in that account to pay for that expenditure. So that's something we all deal with on a daily basis. It's part of life, but I want you to take that same framework and we're going to apply it to a different type of account. So if we go to that next slide, we're going to look at emotional bank accounts, and every relationship that you have in your life, whether it's a spouse, a child, a friend, a sister, a client, or a coworker, you have an emotional bank account of trust with that person. And we build deposits into that account, or we put deposits into that account and build that balance of trust when we contribute in a positive way to that relationship. And we're going to do more of a deep dive into how we make deposits in just a minute. But we also want to talk about withdrawals, because withdrawals are made from an account when we disrespect that relationship in some way. And disrespect is kind of, we tossed around whether we wanted to use disrespect in that sentence, but because that can cover a wide variety of things. But withdrawals are often not intentional. And we all make withdrawals in every account because we're human. And what we need to really look at is being personally accountable for those withdrawals, and make sure that we are aware when we make those withdrawals and then what we can do after that happens. So we want to talk then about making deposits. And the first one here is trying to understand the other individual. So again, this is a relationship of trust. So it's really important for me to step back and think, what is going on with the other individual? If I'm in a conversation, if they, let's say they, well, from a client standpoint, I had a client who had been very congenial on all of our calls and all of our workings, and all of a sudden became very abrupt, very kind of just really short-tempered in our conversations of our meetings. So I really had to think, what's going on with her? And in conversation, discovered she was dealing with some really stressful personal things. So really try to understand what is going on with the other individual. Don't take their response to you personal. So by making a deposit into that account, I can do that by understanding them, offering them a little bit of grace.
Absolutely. Next, we want to talk about, ways you can make a deposit by clarifying expectations for both parties and communicating clearly. When you clarify what you expect out of a partnership or a working relationship, you're really giving that other person a gift. Because if you're secretly thinking, well, they should be responding to my Asana messages within 3 hours, say that out loud and come to a consensus so that you're not, putting that surprising them with your disappointment if you never clarified the expectation in the first place. And also communicating clearly, taking that extra time to break out a topic into some bullet points or flesh it out into a full paragraph, whichever makes more sense for your audience, putting in that effort so that you are known as someone who clarifies, is clear in their communication and is taking that time, so that down the road, if you do inevitably send a slightly jumbled message or something that's a little unclear, you have that track record and they're going to give you a little bit more grace, and that can help to prevent that conflict from arising.
Absolutely. And then the next item is attend to the little things. And the little things are typically not on a template. They're not on a task list. They're the things that if you're paying attention to that relationship, you're going to realize, oh, that might be a helpful thing to do. And I'm going to share an example. It won't be everybody's cup of tea, but it is very authentic to me. And I also think probably very authentic to a few of you who have shared kind of a similar interest in this kind of thing. When I went to my very first personality workshop with a client, I was amazed at all the work that client had to do for us to be successful. They were really, really hustling. And I took over that client about 3 weeks before their workshops and put a lot of demands on them. And they really hustled and worked hard. So I decided when I got back, I was going to send a thank you note to each of the main contacts for the client. And I sent it to their campus mailing address, just telling them how much I appreciated what they did. And I included in that thank you note what I specifically saw them doing to contribute to our success. And then I decided with subsequent clients, when I traveled, I would take the note cards with me and I would have the whole Carnegie team sign those. And then I would mail them when I got home. And that didn't have to happen. It didn't, like I said, it wasn't on a task list, but it really went a long way, I think, to building rapport and trust with that client because they realized I saw them and they were appreciated.
Yeah, that's such a great Beth example. I love that one. Our next one is showing personal integrity and keeping your commitments. Be someone who does what you say you're going to do and someone who is willing to admit when you've made a mistake or when you had the wrong information. And that can go such a long way towards, building up that level of trust so that when you inevitably have to miss that meeting or run a little late or, one example is, I was sharing some timeline dates for a project with a partner and had my screen shared, was kind of walking through them. And one of my colleagues on the client side said, this is different than what you said to us 2 weeks ago. And I had to take that moment and acknowledge, you know what? I did share a slightly different timeline previously because I was working with the information I had at that time. We've done more discovery, so we've adjusted this timeline. So yes, this is different. And this is the best timeline I can give you based on the information I have now. And I'd love to tell you that this is always going to be the timeline, but if we discover more new stuff, this timeline could change again. So taking that moment to acknowledge that I was giving a different message than I had before, and being transparent about that allowed them to have that trust in me. And so I also now have an option if I need to change the timeline again. We have that track history together, and I can draw on that account.
Perfect example. And the last one on this bullet list is be sincere. And I know yesterday I heard Adam Parker talk about being authentic. And this is right down that same alley. We have to be sincere. So like I said, sending note cards may not be authentic to you, but there is something that you can do for every relationship, client, coworker, personal relationships, that is a sincere, genuine indication of your appreciation or a way that you can put a deposit into that bank account. If you are simply making a deposit so that you can make a withdrawal, that comes across as manipulation, and that does not build trust. That will do the exact opposite. So just really look at investing into your relationships all the way across the board, every relationship in your life, and find that sincere, genuine way that you can make a deposit and invest in them. So what we want to do now is, this is a little Zoom chat activity, so everybody get ready. What can you do? I want you to think of one coworker, a specific coworker that you have, and what can you do to make a deposit into the emotional bank account of trust with that coworker, and put that in the chat.
You don't have to call the person out by name. You can keep that part to yourself.
Or you can if you want to. Hey, so-and-so, I'm going to buy you a drink.
Beth is getting all the thank you notes.
Whatever you want.
Oh, tickets, classic.
Yeah.
Love it. Compliments, gratitude. Oh, just straight up telling them they're valued. I love that.
Yeah. That's a powerful word, valued. Absolutely.
Little gifts. I'm an Aries. I love a little gift.
Yeah. Let's tell someone else about them and what a great job they're doing. That's wonderful. Ooh, JD's.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Finding out what works for them based on their team count. I love it. Seth, I love it. Start with a hello. Don't just jump into the question.
So many great ideas. Okay, so now I want you to think about your most difficult client. Not the easy one, not the one you get along really great with, the one who's pushing your buttons, the one that makes you want to just roll your eyes when you see an email come through. I want you to think about your most challenging client, and I want you to put in the Slack or in the chat how you can make a deposit of trust into that bank account. Hey, Riley, how many are we thinking about? Just one. Just one. We're not going to challenge you too much. Oh, give grace. Yeah. So can you, yeah, personal connection.
Ooh, what do you need from me to accomplish the task I have given you? Man, that is a good one.
That's powerful. Listen without getting defensive. That's, yeah, it's not taking things personal. Yeah. Defensiveness will shut down a lot of communication and trust very quickly.
Nick, I love this one, complimenting their attention to detail. I feel like the subtext of that one is you're flipping the script. It's like they feel like they're being nitpicky. Let's flip that to compliment their attention to detail. Thinking about ways to look at what their actions or behaviors in a different light that could be, and seeing the positive in that is so great. Awesome. Megan, yeah. All right, keep these going. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. We're going to collect all these and put these in a slide at the end. So the next topic we want to talk about is making withdrawals from this emotional bank account. We're not going to go too deep in this one because we are at the halfway point in our presentation, but let's kind of quickly talk about a couple of these. When you make a withdrawal, it is very rarely intentional. And it is also the sort of thing that when you look at your actions in the clear light of day, they're not actions you're probably going to want to brag about. You're like, guess what? Today, my husband, I made assumptions about another person at work. I made assumptions about their intention or ability, and I am so proud of myself. That's not how the day goes, right? But being honest with yourself about these, when you've made those withdrawals, it can be that little sign that you're like, I'm going to make an extra deposit tomorrow, or make sure I, circle back and think about how I got to that and try and avoid that in the future. So making assumptions, sending out those unclear expectations, having moments of poor communication or lack of direction. This is a tough one to say about yourself. Lack of personal integrity and accountability. It happens to the best of us.
Absolutely, Jill. Yeah, I think that's something that we can all reflect on with ourselves. And that ties in then to the lack of a sincere apology when we do make a withdrawal. And like we've said several times, we're going to do it. It's going to happen. And the awareness to recognize when we've done it is the first step. And then to own it and really make that sincere apology. And it doesn't have to be in a groveling, oh, I'm sorry, that kind of thing, but just an acknowledgement to the other party. I could have done that better. I didn't show up as my best self today. And then that kind of levels things out a little bit. And then a withdrawal is also when you have a disrespect for another person's time, whether it's intentional or not. And this one really hit home for me because sometimes when we have all the deadlines, we've got a lot of things due in Asana, we've got a deadline and someone else's work is hinging on us meeting that deadline. That's when it can get really easy to just get in that go, 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 go mode and not even think about the people around us and what we're asking of them. Maybe I don't even consider that the creative team has a lot of other clients that they're doing work for. And I start putting some really high pressure demands on them. Or I give someone a timeline without taking into consideration any of their other work or the time zone difference. Those kinds of things can be really easy to do, and they're not intentional. So again, that's another way that we make withdrawals, and we just want to call awareness to that.
Absolutely. All right, so we've stocked our emotional bank account with lots of coins. Hopefully they're generating interest and growing without us having to do the work too. But you know what? Despite our best efforts to prevent the conflict, eventually one is going to arise. And we want to now talk about some strategies and practices to help you face that situation head on. So, another Zoom chat prompt for you all. It can be really tempting when a conflict comes up to just put your head in the sand, let somebody else handle it, just kind of wish that it would go away. What are the potential impacts of avoiding conflict resolution in the workplace. Go ahead and post some ideas about this one in the chat. Doesn't go away and it gets worse. Ooh, souring future success. Loss of credibility.
Lots of resentment. That
Mhm.
was very powerful.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Problem surface later. For me, big one is that that's the biggest culprit for my work bleeding into my personal life. I'm bringing that frustration and resentment home, telling my husband work stories he doesn't want to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
compounding problems.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, despite how it makes us feel, we want to face these problems head on. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So let's talk about how we can actively guide all parties to a resolution. Someone's got to get in there, and I empower all of you to be the person that wades in there to lead this foray to get to this resolution. First thing you want to do is clarify the problem. Sometimes what's going on may be a surface problem, and there could actually be an underlying problem beneath the problem. Maybe what you think is going on is, everyone's getting frustrated because this partner, posts all their homework 1 hour before your weekly meeting calls. Um, but maybe there's actually a bigger problem that they're unclear on the deadline, or the timing of that doesn't work out because of when they're able to meet internally. Figure out what the actual problem is underneath so that you're all on a level playing field and actually working towards the resolution for the same problem. Next, you want to be accountable for your own contribution to that problem. As an Aries only child, I like to believe I'm infallible, but I know that there are going to be times when I have contributed to this problem. So that previous example I just gave about the client who's doing their homework and approvals, right before our meeting. Maybe what I can do is, acknowledge that, I've been setting the due date as the day of the meeting. I can help out with that by actually setting the due date the day before the meeting, and then maybe setting up a reminder so that I'm sending out nudges 3 days before that. So I've contributed to that. Get that out there, model that so that other people can then feel confident and comfortable acknowledging their own contributions as well. Next, you want to embrace the opportunity to understand the ripple effect. And this goes in both directions. Make sure that, when you're talking about a problem, that you take that time to help the other party understand that, if you say something is approved and then we move forward and then 3 days later you say, oh no, actually we need 3 other people to look at it. This is what's happened on our side. This is the impact it's had on our design timeline, our production timeline. This is what all has to happen so that they can understand the larger ecosystem of that problem. But then equally important, take the time to ask those open-ended questions to the other party in the conflict so that they can tell you the ripple effect to this problem as well, so that you can understand, all the ways that it spreads out and figure out a solution that takes all that into consideration.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next one, which is one of my absolute favorite phrases. I have had this in my pocket since 2007 when I did a 3-day silent retreat at a monastery. And if anybody ever wants to hear that story, I love to talk about it, so holler at me. But this is one of the phrases that kind of came to me during that retreat, and that is to be kind but truthful. Being truthful does not have to be harsh. Being truthful is a gift to let everyone know what needs to be considered. People make decisions with the information they have. So if we've not been truthful and given them all of the information to make good, sound decisions, they're not going to make good, sound decisions. And it doesn't have to be harsh. It can be kind. It is one of the greatest gifts that you can give someone is by being truthful. And then make sure all the critical parties are in the discussion. And this one can be really difficult. It's difficult. It has been difficult for me I've been here a little over a year and a half, but knowing who those critical parties are can be tricky. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit, how to make that a little bit of an easier navigation. And then which ties into knowing when to bring in support. This isn't something you have to do on your own, and knowing when and who to bring in is going to be really important, which is what we're going to talk about next.
And Beth, we have about 5 minutes left.
Perfect. So I'm going to run through the top 3 here. keeping your manager aware of an internal conflict is critical. You guys have those one-on-ones. I have a one-on-one with my manager. Let them know how it's going. Let them know what is happening and how it's progressing. You can ask an unbiased third party to join the conversation in a conflict among coworkers. And then the next one, bring conflicts with clients to the attention of your manager and your CSL as soon as you become aware of the conflict. You're not meant to carry this on your own. And I know that depends on your role at the company, but it is really important to make sure all of those people are involved. And I'll pass it to Jill for those last three.
Yeah. So this next one is my favorite. Ask for assistance in preparing for your conversation with the other party. You can that assistance can be putting together a script, actually rehearsing what you're going to say, doing that role play, that back and forth, and practicing it, or sometimes just having a safe space to vent. Get all that emotion out with a trusted colleague. That way you can bring a more level head and calm demeanor to that conflict conversation with the other party. Next one is seeking input from those that have the necessary information to resolve the conflict. Rely on your experts, bring them in, making sure you're getting all of that information and bringing that all to the table. And then finally, and most importantly, remember that you are never fully alone in this work. I know that we're all zooming in from our various little work caves with our only coworkers in our space are our dogs and our cats. But remember that you have the entire Carnegie network at your fingertips, so that when you are trying to solve this problem, don't try and face it alone. Bring in that support. We are here to support each other to come to these solutions. And that's it. We're time for question and answer. You're welcome to put them in the chat or raise a hand. And Michaela, if there's any that were shared earlier, you're welcome to share those too.
Yeah, I can get started with the first question that we have. So is there a best modality to address conflict? Is this best done over Zoom, email, phone call, etc.? What has been both of your experiences?
I'm a big fan of the face-to-face followed by written documentation. Have that conversation, look that person in the eye, feel your feelings, let them feel their feelings, connect as a human, and then follow up and be like, all right, as we discussed, this is where we're at. This is our plan for the future. Have a great weekend. Get that email out or get that Asana message out to them. Beth, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. I prefer face-to-face in the work environment that we have. That's not always possible, but I prefer, if that can't happen, then where I can at least hear them. But I would prefer face-to-face. And then, one of the powerful things about email is it's right there. You can make sure the wording is correct and exactly what you want to say. And they can look at it, read it, see it. It takes some of the emotion out of it if it's a conflict, which can be really powerful and kind of just, like I said, take that emotion out, which can really be helpful. And I think John had a question too.
Yep. So when do you find it's better to wait before addressing conflict versus when it's time to not let things linger?
I will say, John, my experience is there's not a real cut and dried answer. I think the best thing you can do is, for me, I play out the scenario. What do I perceive, or what is the likelihood to happen if I don't address it now, and weigh the risk. So if my experience with this relationship indicates that in previous situations when I've waited, it's escalated, then I know that with that in particular one, I need to go ahead and address it now. Others, maybe where they've kind of play themselves out. If I know that a person in that relationship is kind of fiery and they're going to probably calm down and come back after they think about it, then I may let that just kind of play out that way. So it's going to be really independent on the relationship and probably how much experience you have with them. If you don't have a lot of experience, I would address it sooner than later. Hope that helps.
I second everything Beth said on that one.
Okay, looks like we've got some more in there.
Yes, probably time for one more question. I know we're at time. And also, if there's anything else that you guys have, feel free to send them our way. We will add them in the presentation before it gets sent out.
Yeah.
So last question, what are some key indicators that conflict is moving beyond constructive and is veering off course into something that needs addressing?
Yeah, I love this one. And this is the one where, I'm like the duck paddling underwater. I try and keep that cool veneer up top, but I'm also like, I've turned into onion sweats in the background. You know, that feeling that you're like, I need to, rein in this conversation. So, when there's always there can be that moment in a conversation when you realize people have stopped listening to each other. They're talking at cross purposes. They're talking because they need to get something out, but then they're not listening to the response. And that can be a really good sign to, like, you know what, let's all just take that break. And so, ways you can kind of wade into that conversation or say, like, you know what, like, we've all got a lot of perspectives on this, and I want to make sure that all perspectives are heard, but I also want to be aware of the time we have left in this conversation. So let's pivot back to our agenda, and then I'm going to follow up after this meeting with an email with the key bullet points that I've heard so far, and then we can kind of address this particular issue offline, but let's keep the rest of the meeting going and bring it back. So it's saying, I've heard you and seen you. I'm putting out a really quick answer about how we're going to address this, so I'm not just ignoring it. And then very importantly, I'm going to follow up afterwards and then go into those resolution strategies that we talked about.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for your time today. I hope you have a great rest of your day 2 in the Inside Out conference.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.